Do science and religion have to be separate? If a man says he saw God, do we have to either send him off to a preacher or to a psychiatrist to be cured? Or can we begin to really learn something about these things with the kind of technology and expertise that characterizes modern science? I think we can.
The exciting thing about the age in which we're living is that we are finally, through modern science, beginning to be able to understand the processes by which man is evolving or is able to evolve into higher states of consciousness.
For a long time, people have been saying that the East is East and the West is West, and ne'er the twain shall meet. That may have been true at one time, but perhaps it isn't true anymore, because biofeedback is changing the picture.
This combination of external fulfillment and inner fulfillment is what we seek today, a confluence of physical sciences and technology with the science and technology of man's inner life, which is religion.
ESP, healing, hypnosis, precognition, psychokinesis. Those are strange words. What do they mean? Well, for one thing, they all belong to the domain of parapsychology. I'm Thelma Moss, and I'm a parapsychologist, which means that I am exploring the unseen dimensions of the human mind at its farthest reaches. And this is a moviola, where we're trying to assemble a film that will show you what's happening in our scientific laboratories today in these areas. For example, can you lower your temperature at will? Or have you ever felt so transported by a piece of beautiful music that you felt as if you were leaving your body? Or there are stories about a saint like Teresa who, when she became ecstatic, actually rose above the floor. Of course, a lot of people dismiss that as a superstition, but that's what parapsychologists are trying to explore. One of the most interesting areas of all is that of healing. Now, there's been a long tradition in our history of remarkable men who had this power. Men like Jesus, who was supposedly able to heal a leper by the laying on of hands. And then there was Bernadette, who could cure, with the waters at Lourdes, incurable illnesses. And doctors like Mesmer, who used animal magnetism to cure hysterical illnesses. And in America, there's a tradition of healers, starting perhaps with Quimby, who cured Mary Baker Eddy of her chronic invalidism. And of course, it was she who founded the Christian Science Church. But there were those charlatans and quacks who made respectable scientists very skeptical of such healing arts. And yet, throughout, there have been humble and sincere people who have devoted their lives to healing the sick. Let me show you one such person. Let me turn out the lights here, and turn on the moviola. Now, there is Ma Su. She is an ancient little woman who lives in a remote southern community. Let's hear about healing from her and her pupil, Stipe McWhirter.
My interest in healing started in 1966 when a 7-ton truck backed across me and pulled off, and I lived. Of course, it was a little bit more interesting because I had an out-of-body experience. As I was lying on the roadway after the truck had pulled off of me, I looked back and saw what I looked like. Then after hospitalization and a lot of enforced idleness, I realized that this healing, this miracle that I lived through, needed to be told and taught. So I started to West Georgia College again in 1968. And there, my interest in learning and healing and healers became very, very vital to me. And through Dr. Stewart at the college at West Georgia, I heard about this lady, this 97-year-old lady, Ma Sue. And she has been my best teacher since then. She's still teaching every time I give her a chance to. Well, Ma Sue, do you think that people can learn to do this, to do what you do? You think that they can learn enough faith and learn how to do this?
Yes, if they would read the Bible, they'd learn them themselves, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if they just read it through,
Put up some scripture on them, make them read them, then they come right along. They got to have confidence and faith in these things before you can teach them anything. You can take the Bible and show it to them and tell them how to read that. They get why, then they'll notice what you're talking about. He said, let not your heart be troubled.
Yeah, neither be afraid.
That's what I'm talking about.
Let not your heart be troubled. It's that inner peace, the untroubled heart, that Edgar Cayce taught so much about, too. Edgar Cayce, as you probably know, is America's most famous healer. And when he went into trance, he was able, literally, to diagnose and treat thousands of people that he never even saw. Here we are now, at the Edgar Cayce Foundation in Virginia Beach, where research continues, trying to find out if Cayce's specific treatments are still valid today. Here's their Director of Education, Dr. Herbert Puryear.
So the heart of the teaching is not to read the Edgar Cayce readings, but that should awaken within us an awareness that we can draw from the inner self, especially as we attune to this, and that's through both physical preparation and balance and through the practice of meditation, that as we attune to the inner self, then we can gain that source of healing or source of knowledge that we need.
To tune within and learn to control one's own bodily processes. We call that biofeedback training. Let me tell you about it, it's very interesting. Suppose you're feeling very tense and anxious and your pulse is going a mile a minute. Well, we can put a meter around your wrist, and then every time your pulse goes too fast, a little bell will ring, bing, 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 bing. And that'll tell you it's too high. Well, after a while, you get a sensation throughout your body, and you know how to keep the bell from ringing. That's called biofeedback training, and we can apply it to all sorts of bodily processes. Headaches, temperature, blood pressure, all sorts of things. That's the work of Dr. Elmer Green at the Menninger Foundation.
Biofeedback actually is the feedback of physiological signals to a person. It gives him information about himself that he didn't know about. And biofeedback training is doing something with this information. In essence, you might say it's the answer to psychosomatic disease. Through biofeedback training, people can come towards psychosomatic health. Psychosomatic self-regulation can begin with biofeedback training. And of course, all of this leads into what we might call a science of consciousness, because it's all done in consciousness. There isn't any such thing as biofeedback training. There's only training in internal existential cues. As for instance, in this workshop, we're training people in temperature control. We do this with thermistors, or actually, I guess you might think of them as thermometers, attached to the forehead and to the hand. In this particular case, we're training people to warm up the hand.
Warmth is flowing into my hand. They are warm.
Dr. Green's wife and associate, Alice, is using almost hypnotic suggestion to reinforce the idea of warmth going into the hand.
I can feel the warmth flowing down my arms into my hands.
And as they go through the training program, they learn how to make the hands get warm, merely as a visualization of warmth in the hands, and along with that goes cooling in the head. Now, the cooling in the head isn't much, except in the case of, for instance, migraine patients, and we found that a lot of people who have migraine can get the migraine under control merely through a simple program in controlling the temperature of the hands.
curing a migraine headache by learning to control the body temperature. Isn't that a specific example of a person's mind controlling his body? And if you can do that, perhaps you can also use your mind to control something a little bit away from your body. In parapsychology, we call that psychokinesis, the influence of mind on matter, as in legend, Mohammed moved the mountain. A little bit further along, we talk about the influence of one mind on another mind, and that's called telepathy. Those two areas of research are being studied intensively now at the University of California in Davis by Dr. Charles Tart.
Can man's mind transcend what we think of are the limits of space and time? Can he reach out and have really intimate communication with others, direct mind to mind? These are the kind of things that have been occupying the attention of my laboratory for the past several years, and that we'll look at some of the research on in the next few minutes. This device is for both testing and training a person's ability to directly influence matter with his mind alone, what's technically termed psychokinesis. The machine spins a silver dollar and the subject attempts to make it come up heads or tails. By getting immediate feedback on how his results come out, a person can theoretically gradually learn to do better and better at this sort of task. The experiment you're watching is part of a series on training ESP rather than testing ESP. I'm acting as the sender in the particular sequence you see, selecting numbers 1 to 10 by drawing cards and attempting to send it to the young lady who's acting as subject in a different room. You can see that I will pick a card, try to send it by turning on the appropriate button and concentrating on it, and then when the young lady thinks she has it, she pushes the button to signify her choice, and the light goes on telling her what the number actually was. The idea in this is to learn what kind of feelings go with being right and what kind with going wrong, so that when you have the wrong feelings you can wait and try some other ideas until you get the right ones. Research by myself and others so far indicates that we can train some people to use ESP reliably this way.
Trying to develop ESP in people, can it be done? We really don't know yet. And in fact, in life, a lot of times ESP is confused with coincidence. For example, how many times have you reached for the phone to call a friend, and just as you're reaching, the phone rings and it's your friend? Is that coincidence or ESP? We don't know. More rarely than that, people can have a dream, as a friend of mine did not too long ago, a dream in which she saw her son driving a car on a freeway. And as she was watching in the dream, her son collided headlong with another car, and she woke up terrified because she thought her son had been badly injured. Well, in point of fact, at the very time she'd been having her dream, her son had been in an accident on the freeway. How much of that is coincidence? Or is it telepathy? A lot of parapsychologists have collected these anecdotes over a period of time, thousands of them, and we can't call them anything but anecdotes because we aren't there when the person has the dream. So what's our next step? Well, we try to reproduce the telepathic dream in the laboratory. And that's exactly what Dr. Ullman and Dr. Krippner at Maimonides Hospital have been doing for the past several years, working on the telepathic dream. Let's look at what Dr. Krippner has to say.
When ESP occurs in everyday life, it usually occurs in what we call an altered state of consciousness, such as hypnosis, dreams, or relaxation states. For this reason, when we started our investigations into ESP, we did work with the telepathic dream. In other words, we had one of our subjects sleeping in a soundproof room, trying to dream about a message that was being sent to him from a distant point. At that distant room, one of our psychologists spent most of the night looking at a picture, trying to project or transmit the image of that picture into the dreams of the sleeping subject. Back at the lab, we watched the electroencephalographic machine very closely to see what types of brain waves and what type of eye movements the subject was demonstrating. When he began to produce rapid eye movements, we knew that he was dreaming.
Michael, wake up. Can you tell me what's been going through your mind now?
Yeah. I was at a circus and was laughing at a clown in a big red suit. He was making me laugh. He was very jolly, and he was holding these 3 big red balloons. And it was a holiday, you get Christmas or the 4th of July. That's it. That's all I think.
Okay, thank you. You can go back to sleep now.
In the experiment that you just saw, the target picture was a scene in Honolulu of Santa Claus during a Christmas party on the beach. The dream report from the sleeping subject mentioned a circus and a clown in a big red suit, therefore showing some correspondence with the festive atmosphere of the Christmas beach party. Then when the subject went on to talk about red balloons and a fat and jolly man, he's capturing some of the color and some of the atmosphere which we associate with Santa Claus. Finally, the subject does specifically mention Christmas, therefore adding an additional correspondence to this particular picture. Recently, when I was in the Soviet Union, I learned about electrosleep, which is a therapeutic device used for people with anxiety and with insomnia. When I returned to the United States, I was able to obtain the Electrosone 50, a machine which induces electrosleep among subjects. We have been using the Electrosone 50 in an attempt to determine whether ESP is possible when somebody is in the state of consciousness we call electrosleep. Basically what happens is that a band goes around the subject's head and a weak electrical current goes through the band and into the person's skull. This weak electrical current makes him feel very relaxed, so relaxed that he often sees visual images.
Now this time I want you to again let me know when you feel a sensation around your eyes and mastoid, and it will probably be something like a flashing sensation.
Yeah, it's beginning to flash now.
All right, does it feel comfortable at this point?
Fairly comfortable.
While the person is in the electrosleep device, we give him a sealed envelope, and we ask him to try to guess what picture is in the sealed envelope. One subject came through the report of the image of 3 round balls, something very round, maybe halos. I think of saints and of the halos around their heads. When we opened up the sealed envelope and the second envelope containing the picture, we found it was the famous picture Madonna of the Chair. So this is what we would consider a very good or direct hit.
How is it possible to pick up a message in a dream, or any other way for that matter? Well, we all know that if we tune in on the right wavelength on a radio band, we can pick up a transmitting radio station. That's no problem. Is it possible for a person to get on the right wavelength to pick up somebody else's thoughts? We don't really know yet, but some facts about brainwave theory are clear. For example, we're always, our brains, sending out electrical signals. Sometimes when we're thinking hard, our brains are racing. We're sending out those signals at 50 to 60 cycles a second. That's a brain wave, and it's a beta brain wave. But when we slow down our thinking processes and relax, for example, just close your eyes and relax, your brain wave will then be sending out probably alpha rhythm, which is between 8 and 13 cycles a second. That slow alpha rhythm is what some parapsychologists believe might be the right wavelength for telepathic transmission. And in fact, there are several laboratories today that are working on exactly that problem. At the Psychic Research Foundation in North Carolina, William Roll and his associates are studying a gifted psychic, Mr. Harrabins. Mr. Harrabins here is being hooked into an EEG machine which will register his brain wave patterns. He's proved to be incredibly successful at a particular ESP task, which is to guess the sex of the photographs pasted on these cards, male or female. The object of this study is not to demonstrate ESP ability. He's already done that. But to learn if Mr. Haribins is actually more successful when he's generating alpha rhythm than at other times. So far, this research shows that he does indeed make more correct choices when he's in alpha rhythm. This finding suggests that a gifted psychic may naturally generate alpha rhythm. Okay. If that's true, the next question is, could an ordinary person who has no known psychic ability at all be trained to generate his own alpha rhythm and then, perhaps, develop some ESP ability? It's a good question, and one that Dr. Stanley Krippner, again at Maimonides Hospital, is working on right now.
We have found in some of our earlier studies that there is a relationship between the alpha rhythm and ESP. In our current studies, we are trying to more closely define this type of relationship. Therefore, we have a subject in our soundproof room trying to produce alpha rays. Whenever he produces an alpha wave, he receives the pleasant buzzing tone. Now, while he is engaged in biofeedback training, he also holds a box in his hand called the Schmidt machine. The box will flash either a red light or a green light. It is the subject's job to predict which light will come up, as it is all arranged randomly, and he has no idea of the random order. Therefore, the subject is actually trying to do two things at once. He is trying to determine which of two lights is going to flash on. This is an ESP task, and he is trying to control his own brain waves. The records that we receive on the electroencephalograph machine are very helpful to us in determining not only what type of brainwave goes with ESP, but how brainwave training correlates with ESP. So far, it does seem to us that those subjects that can very quickly turn their alpha on or turn their alpha off are also those subjects that have the highest degree of ESP.
There's an even slower rhythm than alpha, between 6 and 8 cycles a second, called the theta rhythm. And it's that rhythm, theta, that's been discovered in the meditative states of Zen and yogic masters. We wonder now whether that theta rhythm might be linked to the religious or mystical experience. And it's that dimension of human experience that Dr. Elmer Green back at Menninger Foundation is exploring today.
It's interesting that to a large extent people have become interested in alpha waves as representing something about states of consciousness. But what we're finding is that it isn't just alpha waves. They're connected with a state of internal awareness. You're alert, but your attention isn't focused on anything in particular. But the main waves of importance in our work are the theta waves. They're connected with the state of reverie in which hypnagogic images can come to the surface. And it's also interesting that material that is normally unconscious comes to the surface, whether it be Freudian or Jungian or some other kind of material.
Dr. Green's daughter, Judy, conducts the workshop in theta training.
And this is what we're working for. As you go toward sleep, that drowsy state in which you are awake, you'll be in the theta state. And it seems to be this level of consciousness in which creative imagery may come, creative thoughts. It seems the transpersonal aspects of our being can, in this state, become conscious. Unconscious things may come up into consciousness. Okay, so this is what we are aiming at
in the workshop. We're training people with a machine which allows them to hear when alpha and or theta waves are present in their brains. And we turn it usually to the condition so that they can hear both at the same time.
Now, as you close your eyes and relax, you may produce some alpha. If you do, this is the tone that you will hear. Yes. Now that's the high tone. That's the high tone. As you go deeper inside yourself, you may produce some theta. And this is the low tone. Okay? Right. So alpha is the high tone, theta is the low tone. Okay, now you're ready to begin, so just close your eyes and begin to relax, and I will leave the room. feeling?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Was there, did you hear the feedback? Was it, And what did it seem to be associated with?
Well, a very, very joyous feeling. There
Did
were
I hear you
alpha waves,
weeping?
and yes, right.
I wasn't sure. I was listening at the door, and
Yeah.
I thought you weren't having unpleasant experiences.
No, very
Can you
beautiful
describe-
feelings of complete closeness with my Creator.
I see.
And, the God within.
Now, actually, in a training program that we have with college students, we train them to decrease the amount of alpha and increase the percentage of theta. And by the time they do this and can do it consciously, we find that they are much more aware of themselves as people. It's literally leading them into a consciousness of themselves.
Very, very joyous feeling. It makes me cry.
To be conscious of oneself, one's innermost self, hasn't that been the goal of mystics in meditation throughout the ages? And isn't it striking that a young man, just trying to learn to control his alpha rhythm, seems to look as if he were deep in meditation? Of course, that's just the beginning of self-mastery. But those great souls who have learned how to transcend their personal egos sometimes are depicted as having lights emanating from their heads. Moses, coming down from the mountains, was supposed to have a head filled with light. And then there was Jesus, and Mary, and St. Francis, and the Buddha, and Mohammed. What is that halo? Just an artistic convention? Or could it be an invisible radiation that becomes visible under certain conditions? We don't know. But recently, in the Soviet Union, some people named Kirlian invented a new photographic technique that makes visible certain invisible radiations. And as a matter of fact, in our laboratory here on the campus at UCLA, we have a similar photographic device which was invented by my colleague, Mr. Kendall Johnson. And with the photographs that we take, we also can see absolutely fascinating radiations emanating from plants and from people. Here's our lab, and there's our equipment, and as you can see, there's no camera and there's no lens. The way we take a picture is to put the finger directly on the film and send an electrical current through. Now, this is a research associate, Miriam, and we're taking her picture in its normal condition. And this time we've asked Miriam to keep her finger in some ice and ice water until it gets very cold and numb. At that point, we take a picture again. Now we can show you what those pictures look like when we have them enlarged. This first one is how our finger looks in its normal condition. And this one shows you what her finger looks like when it has been cold and the aura or the corona discharge gets much smaller and seems to condense around it. Now here we have a slightly different condition. Larry has volunteered to let himself get intoxicated. He's already had a couple of drinks and he's now getting his third. And we will take his picture progressively over time. Here we can show you what his picture looks like in a normal condition, and this is what it looks like under intoxication. There seems to be a difference. Here is another volunteer, Barry, who has the remarkable talent of being able to go into trance through hyperventilating at will. Now he's hooked up to the alpha conditioning machine, and we're going to be able to record his alpha rhythm as well. Now I'd like to show you what his pictures look like normally and when he's in trance, and there's a very dramatic difference. Here, his picture looks quite different from the usual normal picture. But when he goes into trance, you can see this. This is probably the most dramatic difference we've been able to record thus far. This photograph shows you a typically normal and presumably healthy finger with radiations, as you can see, predominantly in blue and yellow-white. But we've come to believe that with anxiety or nervousness, the picture looks very different. with murky red blotches extending beyond the fingertip. Now here, we've taken one person's fingertip with 2 or 3 seconds exposure in between, so that on one film we've got 5 different fingerprints. And what's interesting here is those red dots in the center of the finger. They seem to come and go mysteriously and very quickly. We simply don't know what that means. We're going to see some slides that we've done of leaves. This is a geranium leaf, and we have a characteristic pattern for almost all the things that we've taken in color. The predominant colors are blue, white, and red, and variations thereof. As you can see here in this rather beautiful leaf, we get bubbles or beads. Depending on the character of the leaf, the pattern changes. Here, for example, we have a geranium leaf which is shown in several different exposure times, because the length of exposure will also change the color that we're going to see. For example, up in the left-hand corner, it was a very short exposure time, and we get predominantly a dark blue and lots of black. Everything in nature that we've photographed thus far has a radiation, whether animal, vegetable, or mineral. And what's more, every species has its own particular pattern of radiation. Just as there are no 2 fingerprints alike, similarly, there are no 2 radiations that we photographed that look alike. And yet, throughout, interpenetrating all of these objects, there seems to be one fundamental energy. What is this radiation? This new vision of an object that we see? Does it show us a different dimension that exists beyond what our eyes can see, but that's there all the time? We don't know. And that's true of so much that lies within us and still far beyond our reach. We may be at the threshold of a new age, about to enter into a new phase of our evolution, passing beyond the blindness of this life into a new and dazzling world of the mind.